Graphing linear equations in slope-intercept form. Chapter 4, Lesson 4. As we're looking down here on our state standards 8EE6, you can see that we're going to talk again here about our y equals mx plus b. We're talking about slope and our initial value again while we're looking at all of those. We're going to do a little bit about maybe writing an equation. We're going to get more to that. That's one of our skills coming up. And again, down here in 8F3, you can see that we're working towards that writing same thing, a function or equation in y equals mx plus b. Today our vocab, the first one we're going to start with is this x-intercept. It's the place where the line crosses the x-axis, which you can see down here. An example, again over here being the x-axis. So this point here is the x-intercept, where that line crosses the x-axis at some point A0. A being the point where it crosses. Perhaps over here saying it's at 3, 0. That second coordinate will always be 0 because when we're down here, no matter where that line crosses on the x-axis, the y value will always be 0. The y-intercept, something we're going to talk extensively about today, is where the point crosses the y-axis. Remember, the y is going up and down, so you can see it right here. Always going to be listed to us as 0b, standing for some point 0b. Like here, I don't know, let's just say it's 5. So 0, 5, because no matter what, that first one's always going to be 0 because our x value will always be 0 on the y-axis. We're going to talk a lot about that y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis, referring to it extensively as this letter b. Well, that's what we want to know about, and it's our initial value. Our slope-intercept form, so this is going to be the big thing today. We're going to use this equation, y equals mx plus b, every time. Now, if you want to, you can draw a little line, or you can write it on in that m is the slope. If you need that reminder, that slope is rise over run. We've been using that a lot. And then our y-intercept is b. I abbreviate it as y, and the initial value, the starting value. So every time we talk about writing the equation, it's going to be in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. The nice thing is, if it's in this form, and I say, what's the slope? No work. What's the intercept? No work. You just find it. Example would be like here, where it says, find the slope and y-intercept of each equation. So then, first off, is it written in our form of y equals mx plus b? Pretty much, for me in math class, and you'll see some others as well, we're going to switch this right here from subtracting to adding the opposite. IXL and others may not always do that, but we're going to switch it to adding. And what is the opposite? What is the opposite of 5? Negative 5. Thus, we can then say, what is the slope? What is the m? What's the thing in the m spot? You can write out the word m, or the word slope, or you can just tell me m equals 3/4. Same thing, what's the y-intercept here? What's in the b spot? b equals, careful, don't lose that up there, that's a negative 5. That's your final answer. Done. Write down that original problem, and then give me the answers. Done. Rinse, lather, repeat. Is it in the form y equals mx plus b? Is it in slope-intercept form? If it is, awesome. What is that m? What is in the spot of the slope? 5, positive 5, great. And then what is your b? Since it already is adding, since we already have this adding here, just grab that number. b, what's in the spot with b? 12. Done. Final answer there, as well as original problem written out, and you're set to go. Every once in a while, I want to say, all right, here it is. Is it in the form y equals mx plus b? Is the y all by itself over here? No. So then we're going to have to do a little bit of work. Let me move that y equals mx plus b out of our way. We'll move it down here, because what we need to do is we need to get the y all by itself. So we need to get rid of this adding half. So yes, you can subtract half, or I'm going to add that negative half to both sides. y, because those cancel out. You're left with, on the left side, y equals, I'm going to leave that negative 6x where it's at, because then it's in the same form as this down here, our slope-intercept form, and then bring back that plus. Careful, don't lose that half, that negative with it. Now again, here we have it. Our slope-intercept form is what we're in, so you can tell me that m equals negative 6. And then what is the y-intercept? What's in the place of the b? Negative half. Negative 1/2. Sometimes you might have to do just a quick little rearranging of the formula, or the equation rather, so that it is in this y equals mx plus b, because then we can just look quickly at the equation and grab our answer. Again, we're wanting to do this because it's going to help us with our y equals mx plus b, writing the equation through it, as well as seeing that up here in the I can statement. Then again, down here, where we're going to be able to look at functions later on. Graph the equation. When we talk about graphing the equation, I usually write down 2 steps. Step 1, graph B. Graph your y-intercept. Then step 2, you're going to use your slope for your second point. Here's what I mean. Go back up here to the top. Is our equation in the form y equals mx plus b? It's very close. Switch that subtraction to adding. The opposite of a positive 8 will be negative 8. Step 1 says to graph b. So I'm going to come up here. My b is negative 8. Grabbing it right from the equation. I'm going to write it down here so we can see it. Graph a negative 8. So at the y-axis, remember that's going up and down, very important, up and down. We're going to put a point here on that line at negative 8. That dot goes down here. Count carefully. Then from there, it says to use slope. Well, our slope is 4. What is 4 as a fraction? Again, that came from right here, where that m is. 4 as a fraction is 4 over 1. Please remember that our slope was m, which also equaled rise over run. When we pull that fraction down, it tells us we're going to rise 4 and run 1. From this y-intercept right here, go and rise 4. So go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it says to run 1. So from here, go over 1 spot and make a dot. That's where our point is. So we're going to make a dot there. And then just for simplicity's sake, for practice, do it again. Go up 1, 2, 3, 4, over 1, and make a dot there. And for practice sake, let's do it one more time. Up 1, 2, 3, 4, because the slope is 4 over 1. Up 4, over 1. Now we have a nice linear equation of points. Now here again, grab your straight edge and draw a line. Please make sure that there are arrows on the end of your line. And now you have correctly graphed the equation. You've graphed it. Now, don't forget, don't lose this up here with everything else that says identify the x-intercept. Where did that cross the x-axis at? Right here. What is that x-intercept? That's at 2, 0. So our x-intercept is at 2, 0. You can see it right there. If you ever can't see it, that's where you could plug in to the equation the y value of 0. Let me break up a new page and show that to you. So you can take that equation, because it's going to be the x-intercept at some point a 0, you can take that 0 and plug it in for y, because it's always going to be at 0. And then you can solve this equation. Step 1, get that variable all by itself. So I'm going to add a positive 8 to get rid of that on both sides. 8 equals 4x. We're going to divide both sides by 4. 2 equals x. So again, your x-intercept is at 2, 0, because no matter what, the y value will always be 0 for your x-axis, because that's where it crosses the x-axis. Let's do it again. Writing it out again, y equals mx plus b. Write that on out. On your assignment, if you're doing the book assignment, I want to see this original equation written out, and then from there, make sure you switch it to adding the opposite. And from there, then just graph it. Grab that scratch piece of paper where you have the grid paper on it, and we're going to graph it. Please remember our steps. Right now on your notes, please write it on in. Step 1, graph B. Start with that y-intercept. Here it is. It's at -2. So go put a dot on the y-axis at -2. Common mistake is not putting it on the vertical, the up and down axis, so be careful of that. Then step 2 is use slope. Use the m. Well, what is your m? It's a -2/3. So your rise, a -2, and run 3. So from that y-intercept, go down 1, 2, because our rise was -2, and then run 1, 2, 3. Again, that run came from our run right here. Put a dot. And let's do it again. 1, 2, a rise of -2 and a run of 1, 2, 3. Put a dot there. And you could keep going, but that's enough points for us. So let's go ahead and draw a line. Make sure you've used that straight edge. And again, then from there, make sure there are arrows on that line of yours. And when it says to identify the x-intercept, if you can see it, great. Where did it cross that x-axis? If not, plug a 0 in for the y into the equation and then solve. But since I can see it here, I'm just going to say here is my x-intercept. It is at, careful, -1, 2, 3. -3, 0 is the x-intercept. I will allow you to abbreviate it x-int. You can write it out completely if you would like. Otherwise, here we go. Equation, the cost for making a friendship bracelet is y equals half x plus 2, or x is the number of bracelets. Graph the equation. Well, today we're going to graph it in slope-intercept form. Is that equation in y equals mx plus b? It is. So step 1, graph b. Please write that into your notes. You don't have to do it on the assignment, but I want you to write it in so you can see it multiple different places when you go back. So I'm going to put a dot there. I'm going to switch over to the black so it jumps out a little bit better. You can see it. Then it says to use slope. Step 2, use your slope, m. Now, 0.5 is m. That's great, and you can use that, but I'd like to switch that to a fraction. Half, or 0.5, or 5/10 is the same as 1/2. So I'm going to use that as my m. So when I get this half, that again came from 0.5. Switched it that way. Why? So that way when we're looking at this graph here, we can look at going rise over run. So instead of 0.5, I can say the rise is 1 and the run is 1, 2. Put a dot. Whoop. And then do it again. Rise 1, run 2. Make yourself a dot. Rise 1, run 2. Make yourself a dot. And we can continue that pattern on and on and on and on. But what we're going to be interested in is once we've got that, draw a line in. Now, if you're like me, once you've graphed that, we're going to move on to part B, and you can see I've kind of run out of room here to write this. You can draw an arrow, you can bleed into between spaces, you can draw in between the boxes if you'd like. What I'm going to do just for notes purposes here, I'm going to try to slide this up here, so that way I can interpret the slope and the y-intercept. The y-intercept, we said, was 2. So interpret that. If you don't make any bracelets, what's the amount of cost you have? You have $2, which that's a $2 startup cost, or $2 in expenses to start with. We already talked about the slope being 0.5 or half, which means it's going to cost half a dollar per bracelet. That's our slope, the rate of change. That's all we do when we interpret it. Take that 0.5. What does it represent in the context of this problem? It is the amount of dollars per bracelet. Just like we talked about change in y over the change in x. The y is dollars per bracelet. So that can help you with your interpreting. We'll just go back and figure out our labels. Y over x, dollars over bracelets. So that means it's 50 cents or half a dollar or $0.5 per bracelet. Final question. Is this linear equation a proportional relationship? Justify your answer. Previous lesson we talked about it had to be 2 things to be proportional. 1, is this a line? Yes, it is. It's a straight line, no bends, no curves. But then the second thing, it had to go through the origin. That is correct. Does that go through this point right here, the 0, 0 point? Does that graph go through it or touch it? No. So then to justify your answer, you're going to have to write down below. I've run out of space, so I'm going to add a new page very quickly to justify my answer. No. Why not? What did it not do? Again, you can write this next to it. Maybe you have smaller handwriting and it fits in the box, so you can write it below the box of notes. No, it doesn't go through the origin. And that's it. You have answered the question, and you have justified your answer. It doesn't go through the origin. Whatever thing it fails, you write on in. And then if it is a straight line and it does go through the origin, then that's all you say. Yes, it's a straight line through the origin. A lot today working on this, looking at our y equals mx plus b so we can write equations in it, identifying our slope and initial value, looking up those, and again, down here, talking about being able to write it in our function form. Today, can you find slopes and y-intercepts in equations and graphs, as well as graph linear equations written in that form of y equals mx plus b? That is our slope intercept form. Going to play a big part in the next couple of lessons.